The vast data collection arrays of the Zarkai Collective stretched across 12 star systems, a network of quantum-linked sensors that had mapped and categorized thousands of emerging civilizations. Most followed a predictable pattern: technological development, internal conflicts, eventual stagnation, and then absorption into the collective's vast interstellar infrastructure. Stellar cartography analyst Krivax studied the incoming data streams with the clinical detachment of a species that had long ago transcended emotional engagement. Humanity appeared as little more than a blip, a single species confined to a modest yellow star system, still relying on primitive fusion drives and chemical rockets. Their radio emissions were a cacophony of conflicting signals: entertainment, communication, scientific research, all broadcasting their technological immaturity to the universe. The initial report was standard. Classification: Emerging Tier 3 Civilization. Projected integration timeline: 127 standard galactic cycles. Potential military utility: minimal to moderate. What Krivax couldn't know was how fundamentally wrong those projections would prove to be. The Zarkai had perfected the art of species acquisition over millennia. Their approach was neither purely militaristic nor entirely diplomatic, but a calculated blend of technological enticement, psychological manipulation, and strategic pressure. Most species they encountered recognized the futility of resistance. The collective offered advancement, protection, and a place in a grand galactic hierarchy. Few had ever meaningfully challenged this paradigm. Humanity's solar system sat in what the collective considered a resource-rich but strategically unremarkable sector of the Orion Arm. Preliminary scans showed a species just beginning to extend its reach beyond its home planet. They had established rudimentary outposts on their moon and Mars, were conducting exploratory missions to the outer planetary system, and had begun the first tentative steps towards serious space colonization. Their technological progression was interesting, if not remarkable. They had developed quantum computing, were making advances in genetic engineering, and had begun theoretical work on advanced propulsion systems. But they were still generations away from meaningful interstellar travel, or so the Zarkai believed. The first detailed cultural analysis was compiled by the collective's Xenosociological Division. It was a massive document, running to over 900,000 data units, attempting to categorize human behavior, social structures, and potential military capabilities. The report was simultaneously fascinating and perplexing. Humans demonstrated an unprecedented level of internal contradiction. They were a species capable of breathtaking scientific achievement and horrific violence in the same moment. Their historical records showed civilizations that could construct magnificent works of art and engineering, while simultaneously engaging in systematic destruction. They appeared to be in a constant state of technological and social evolution, with change occurring at a rate that defied the collective's standard predictive models. Their cultural artifacts, what they called media, revealed complex psychological landscapes. Humans told stories about overcoming impossible odds, about transformation, about the triumph of individual will against systemic limitations. These weren't just entertainment. They seemed to be a form of collective psychological preparation. More concerning were their conflict resolution strategies. Unlike most species the Zarkai had encountered, humans didn't simply submit to superior force. Their history was a constant narrative of resistance, of finding unexpected solutions, of transforming limitation into opportunity. The military assessment was particularly noteworthy. Despite having no unified global government, humans had developed an astonishing array of defensive and offensive technologies. Their weapon systems were crude but inventive. Their communication networks were decentralized and resilient. Most critically, they seemed to view technological and strategic challenges as problems to be solved, not insurmountable barriers. Krivax's preliminary recommendation was straightforward: initiate standard acquisition protocols, offer technological exchange, demonstrate overwhelming capability, expect compliance. What the analyst couldn't know was that this recommendation would be the first step toward the most significant miscalculation in the collective's history. Humanity was not just another species to be cataloged and controlled. They were something else entirely. A dynamic, unpredictable force that would soon redefine the very concept of galactic civilization. The Zarkay diplomatic vessel emerged from quantum translation precisely at the edge of the Sol system's asteroid belt, a gleaming construct of biomechanical engineering that defied the crude understanding of space travel possessed by most emerging civilizations. Ambassador Zeltok reviewed the preliminary psychological profiles one final time, a slight tremor of anticipation rippling through the neural link tendrils that connected him to the ship's communication systems. First contact was always a calculated performance. The collective had perfected this dance across hundreds of species, a choreography of technological display, psychological pressure, and strategic intimidation. Humans would be no different, or so Zeltok believed. The initial transmission was a masterpiece of diplomatic engineering. Translated into multiple human languages, English, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, the message was a carefully constructed blend of technological enticement and implied threat. It began with an almost casual demonstration of the Zarkai's capabilities, a holographic projection that simultaneously appeared on every active communication network on Earth, in every major research facility, government center, and media hub. Greetings, humanity. The transmission began. We are the Zarkai Collective. Your technological development has reached a point of potential integration into our galactic community. The language was precise, clinical. Each word had been processed through multiple xenolinguistic filters to ensure maximum comprehension and minimal emotional provocation. The holographic representation was equally calculated, a neutral form that combined elements designed to appear both familiar and distinctly alien, meant to inspire a mixture of curiosity and mild intimidation. The United Planetary Council's response was anything but predictable. Instead of panic, fear, or immediate submission, the human representatives displayed a level of composure that confused Zarkai behavioral models. The initial meeting was scheduled at the United Nations complex in New York, a location chosen for its historical significance in global diplomacy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead xenopolitical strategist for Earth's diplomatic corps, was not what the Zarkay expected. Her background was a tapestry of contradictions, a theoretical physicist with advanced degrees in comparative anthropology, a former military strategist who had transitioned into diplomatic service. Her eyes betrayed nothing, her posture a study in controlled tension. The Zarkay delegation consisted of 5 representatives, each carefully selected to represent different functional aspects of the collective. They arrived expecting a standard acquisition protocol, present capabilities, offer integration, demonstrate superiority. What followed was anything but standard. Dr. Rodriguez's initial questions were surgical in their precision. "You claim to represent a collective," she began, her voice calm and measured. "Define the parameters of this collective. What are the criteria for membership? What are the constraints on individual and cultural autonomy?" The questions were deceptively simple, but each one revealed a profound understanding of the potential complexities of interspecies negotiation. The Zarkay representatives found themselves explaining concepts they had long considered self-evident, forced to articulate the nuances of their civilization in ways they had never before experienced. Behind the diplomatic facade, Earth was mobilizing. Quantum computing networks began analyzing every transmitted byte of Zarkay communication. Military strategists war-gamed potential scenarios with an intensity that would have shocked the alien visitors. Space research facilities that had previously been working on theoretical propulsion systems suddenly found themselves receiving unprecedented funding and resources. The Zarkay had intended to present themselves as an inevitable force, a galactic infrastructure that humanity would be fortunate to join. Instead, they found themselves being studied, analyzed, their every communication parsed with clinical precision. What truly unnerved the Zarkay delegation was the humans' absolute lack of fear. Most species they encountered displayed immediate signs of psychological submission when confronted with technological superiority. Humans, by contrast, seemed to view the encounter as an intellectual challenge, a problem to be solved rather than a threat to be survived. Ambassador Zeltok's preliminary report back to the collective was cryptic. First contact demonstrates significant deviation from standard integration models. Subjects display unprecedented levels of adaptive cognitive processing. Recommended approach: extended observation and comprehensive psychological analysis. What Zeltok couldn't articulate was the growing sense of unease that permeated the Zark delegation. Humans weren't just another species to be categorized and controlled. They were something fundamentally different, a civilization that saw every limitation as an opportunity, every challenge as a potential transformation. The initial approach was complete, but the real engagement was only beginning. The Zarkai Psychological Warfare Division was renowned throughout known space. They had broken civilizations without firing a single weapon, dismantling species' collective will through meticulously crafted cognitive attacks that targeted the most vulnerable aspects of collective consciousness. Their methods were so refined that most species capitulated before understanding they were under assault. Their initial psychological probe against humanity was designed to be devastating. Dr. Xanthril, lead architect of the psychological intervention, assembled a multi-dimensional assault package that had successfully neutralized 17 distinct civilizations. The strategy involved a cascading series of simulations and information vectors calculated to induce collective existential despair. The first wave targeted human communication networks with precision-engineered psychological content. Massive data streams appeared simultaneously across global networks, perfect simulations of total planetary destruction. These weren't mere images, but fully realized scenarios backed by complex predictive modeling. Each simulation showed Earth's complete annihilation through various scenarios: massive asteroid impacts, solar system-wide environmental collapse, technological apocalypse. The simulations were technically flawless. They incorporated accurate geological data, climate models, population distribution information. Every detail was meticulously constructed to appear completely real, down to individual human faces frozen in moments of terror. What the Zarkai didn't anticipate was humanity's response. Instead of collective panic, the human response was something the Zarkai psychological models had no framework to comprehend. Research institutions worldwide began systematically analyzing the simulations. Within hours, teams of scientists, mathematicians, military strategists, and cognitive researchers were collaborating across global networks. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, a Nigerian quantum systems theorist working at the International Resilience Research Center, was the first to publicly deconstruct the psychological attack. Her analysis, broadcast globally, didn't just challenge the simulations, it transformed them into a comprehensive study of potential existential threats. These scenarios are not predictions, she explained in a globally transmitted presentation. They are mathematical models of potential systemic challenges. Our job is not to fear them, but to understand and develop mitigation strategies. Her response epitomized something the Zarkai found incomprehensible. Humans didn't just react to threats, they weaponized information. Each attempted psychological manipulation was immediately transformed into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. The second wave of the psychological probe was more direct. The Zarkai transmitted detailed simulations showing humanity's complete subjugation. These weren't just visual representations, but complex narrative constructs that demonstrated the futility of resistance. They showed advanced alien technologies, overwhelming force, the systematic dismantling of human civilization. Military analysts around the world didn't just watch these simulations. They began developing counter-strategies in real time, crowdsourcing analysis, creating adaptive response protocols. Online forums dedicated to strategic analysis exploded with activity. What the Zarkai intended as a demonstration of hopelessness became a global training exercise. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had led the initial diplomatic engagement, recognized the psychological attack for what it was. Her response was to coordinate a global interdisciplinary task force dedicated to studying the Zarke's communication methodology. Within days, they had developed preliminary frameworks for understanding alien psychological warfare techniques. The most alarming development for the Zarke came from an unexpected quarter. Human creative industries, filmmakers, writers, game designers, began incorporating the alien psychological probes into narrative experiences. What was meant to induce terror became source material for human creativity, a collective processing mechanism that transformed fear into art and strategic understanding. Children in schools began conducting simulation analyses as educational exercises. Military academies used the Zarkai transmissions as advanced training scenarios. Scientific institutions saw them as opportunities for interdisciplinary research. Dr. Xandril's final report to the Zarkai Collective was a study in professional bewilderment. The psychological intervention hadn't just failed, it had been completely repurposed by the target civilization. Recommendation: the report concluded, immediate comprehensive reassessment of human cognitive resilience. Current psychological models are fundamentally inadequate. What the Zarke didn't understand was that they hadn't just encountered a species. They had discovered a living, breathing adaptive system that transformed every challenge into an opportunity for growth, understanding, and collective evolution. Humanity was not a civilization to be conquered. It was a force of nature waiting to be understood. The first kinetic strike came without warning. A small research station in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a millisecond of overwhelming technological force. The Zarke considered it a measured demonstration, a precise application of power meant to showcase the futility of resistance. They were catastrophically wrong. The targeted station belonged to the International Deep Space Research Consortium, a collaborative platform that represented some of humanity's most innovative scientific minds. What the Zarkai saw as a strategic point of psychological pressure, humans viewed as an act of unforgivable aggression. Within hours of the attack, a global response mechanism activated that defied every expectation of the alien attackers. It wasn't a military mobilization in the traditional sense, but something far more dangerous, a coordinated, almost organic technological response. Dr. Marcus Chen, lead researcher at the Quantum Adaptive Systems Laboratory in Singapore, was among the first to begin systematic analysis of the attack debris. Most species would have been paralyzed by such a devastating strike. Humanity's response was to turn the destruction into an unprecedented research opportunity. Fragments of the destroyed station were collected, analyzed, and reconstructed through a global network of research institutions. What would have been a moment of mourning became a technical challenge. Universities, private research labs, military technology centers, and independent research groups formed an impromptu network, sharing data in real time. The first breakthrough came faster than anyone could have anticipated. Less than 72 hours after the attack, Dr. Chen's team had not only analyzed the weapon's signature, but had begun developing initial countermeasures. Their findings were immediately shared across global networks, transformed into open-source research packets that could be studied and modified by anyone with sufficient technical expertise. What the Zarke didn't understand was that they had just introduced humanity to a new technological problem. And there was nothing humans loved more than an impossible challenge. The technological escalation happened on multiple fronts simultaneously. While research teams analyzed the attack, other groups began developing adaptive defensive technologies. Military strategists worked alongside civilian researchers, breaking down traditional barriers between scientific and defensive domains. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now leading a newly formed extraterrestrial response coordination unit, recognized the broader strategic implications. The attack wasn't just a military action. It was an invitation to technological evolution. Quantum computing networks that had previously been theoretical research projects were now fully mobilized. Artificial intelligence systems developed rapid response modeling of potential technological countermeasures. What would have taken years of development was now being accomplished in weeks, driven by a collective human determination that defied conventional understanding. The most surprising development came from unexpected quarters. Open-source research platforms began crowdsourcing technological solutions. Students, independent researchers, and technology enthusiasts from around the world contributed to a massive, distributed research effort. The Zark's attack had done something they never intended. It had unified humanity in a way no previous global challenge had managed. Reverse engineering efforts produced their first significant breakthrough just 47 days after the initial attack. A modified quantum entanglement communication system, developed by a team that included researchers from Brazil, India, Russia, and the United States, demonstrated the ability to partially disrupt the Zark's weapons targeting systems. Admiral Catherine Rodriguez, overseeing the military technological response, understood the deeper implication. "This isn't about defense," she told her strategic planning team. "This is about transforming every attack into an opportunity for advancement." The Zark's continued to monitor human technological development with increasing concern. Their initial projections had placed humanity decades away from meaningful defensive capabilities. Instead, they were witnessing a civilization that could turn a single attack into a comprehensive technological leap. What truly terrified the Zark's leadership was the speed of human adaptation. Each technological probe was immediately transformed into a learning opportunity. Defensive systems were being developed faster than offensive strategies could be conceived. By the time the Zark's realized the full implications of their initial attack, humanity had already moved beyond simple defense. They were developing technologies that didn't just counter the alien threat. They were reimagining the very concept of technological warfare. The technological escalation was complete. But for humanity, it was just the beginning of a much larger transformation. Warfare, for the Zark's collective, had always been a precise, mathematically calculated endeavor. Their military doctrine was a symphony of predictive algorithms, strategic modeling, and overwhelming technological superiority. They had conquered civilizations by reducing conflict to a series of calculable variables: force projection, resource allocation, psychological attrition. Humanity shattered every single one of those assumptions. The first human strike teams were nothing like the conventional military units the Zark's had encountered in their centuries of galactic conquest. They were fluid, adaptive units that seemed to defy traditional military organization. A typical human strike team might include a quantum physicist, a cybersecurity expert, a biomechanical engineer, and a former special forces operator, all functioning with a level of collaborative intuition that overwhelmed standard tactical analysis. Commander Aria Santiago led one such unit, codenamed Chimera Team. Her background was a testament to human complexity. Born in the rebuilt coastal regions of the Philippines, she had spent her early career in disaster response, then transitioned to advanced military research, and finally to this new form of extraterrestrial conflict. Her team didn't just fight. They solved problems in real time, transforming each engagement into a multi-dimensional puzzle. Their first major operation targeted a critical Zark's communication relay in the outer asteroid belt. The mission parameters were anything but conventional. Instead of a straightforward attack, Chimera Team approached the mission as a complex systems disruption challenge. They didn't attempt to destroy the relay. Instead, they systematically re-engineered its communication protocols, introducing cascading anomalies that gradually undermined the Zark's strategic communication networks. It was less an attack and more a form of technological jiu-jitsu, using the enemy's own systems against them. The Zark's military leadership was baffled. Their threat assessment models collapsed when confronted with a type of warfare that didn't conform to any known strategic paradigm. Human units didn't just attack. They transformed the very nature of the conflict with each engagement. A Zark's tactical analysis report captured the growing sense of confusion. Enemy engagement patterns demonstrate no consistent strategic logic. Tactical decisions appear to emerge from collective cognitive processes that defy standard predictive modeling. What the Zarkai failed to understand was that human warfare had evolved beyond traditional concepts of conflict. Each military unit was essentially a mobile problem-solving ecosystem. They didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with information, with adaptive strategy, with a level of collaborative intelligence that turned every battlefield into a dynamic, evolving system. Small human strike teams began conducting operations that seemed to defy conventional military logic. They would infiltrate critical Zarkai infrastructure, not through brute force, but through intricate, multi-layered approach vectors that combine technological infiltration, psychological manipulation, and real-time adaptive strategy. In one remarkable operation, a team led by Lieutenant Daniel Okoye managed to temporarily redirect an entire Zarkai fleet by introducing subtle navigation algorithm modifications. They didn't destroy the fleet. They simply made it temporarily irrelevant, routing it through a series of strategically inconvenient star systems. The psychological impact was as significant as the tactical one. Zarkai military personnel began experiencing unprecedented levels of operational uncertainty. Their carefully constructed technological superiority was being systematically dismantled not through overwhelming force, but through constant, unpredictable adaptation. Human military doctrine emerged as something entirely new, a fluid, almost organic approach to conflict that saw warfare as a continuous problem-solving exercise. Traditional military hierarchies dissolved, replaced by collaborative networks that could rapidly reconfigure based on emerging challenges. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as a key strategic advisor, described it best in a classified briefing. "We're not fighting a war. We're engaging in a continuous adaptive conversation with a technological threat. Every encounter is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to transform." The Zarkai had sought warriors. Instead, they had provoked an entire species that saw conflict as the ultimate evolutionary challenge. Each battle was not just a military engagement, but a collective learning experience that pushed the boundaries of human potential. Humanity was rewriting the very definition of warfare, and the Zarkai were rapidly becoming aware that they were facing something far more dangerous than an enemy. They were facing a force of continuous, collaborative transformation. The Zarkai Xenopsychological Research Division was the most advanced of its kind in the known galaxy. They had spent millennia studying the psychological structures of countless civilizations, developing intricate models that could predict collective behavioral patterns with near absolute certainty. Their understanding of sentient psychology was so comprehensive that most species capitulated long before any physical conflict began. Until humanity. Lead researcher Vrilnak stared at the cascading data streams, each report more bewildering than the last. The human psychological profile defied every established synopsychological model. What should have been a straightforward analysis had become a comprehensive deconstruction of everything the Zarkai understood about sentient behavior. Humans weren't just resistant to psychological manipulation. They transformed it. The research division began compiling what they called the Human Anomaly Reports. Each report was a study in systematic confusion. Traditional psychological warfare techniques that had broken entire civilizations simply stopped functioning when applied to humans. Take, for example, the standard Zarkai psychological destabilization protocol. It involved transmitting carefully constructed information streams designed to induce collective existential despair. With most species, this would create progressive social breakdown, leading to complete cultural capitulation. With humans, the exact opposite occurred. When confronted with scenarios designed to induce hopelessness, human communities would spontaneously generate collaborative problem-solving mechanisms. Online forums would transform theoretical apocalyptic scenarios into comprehensive survival strategies. Educational institutions would develop entire curriculum modules around potential existential challenges. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the primary human interface for xenopsychological research, explained it during a classified global briefing. "We don't see challenges as threats," she said. We see them as opportunities for collective growth. The Zarkay discovered something truly terrifying about human psychology. Their species didn't just survive challenges, they were psychologically engineered to thrive on them. Individual human accounts began circulating through Zarkay communication networks, stories that defied conventional understanding. Soldiers who continued mission objectives after sustaining injuries that would have killed most species. Scientists who viewed complete experimental failure as the most exciting possible outcome. Communities that responded to systemic destruction by immediately beginning reconstruction efforts. One particular case study sent shockwaves through the Zarkay Research Division. During a simulated total planetary destruction scenario, a group of high school students in Sao Paulo, Brazil, didn't display fear. Instead, they began developing a comprehensive multi-generational survival and reconstruction strategy, complete with detailed technological and social infrastructure plans. The human capacity for psychological adaptation was not just a defensive mechanism, it was a fundamental evolutionary strategy. Vrilnax's final psychological assessment was a masterpiece of professional bewilderment. Humans do not have a psychological breaking point, the report concluded. They view psychological pressure as a form of adaptive challenge. Each attempt to induce collective trauma is immediately transformed into a collaborative learning experience. What the Zarkay couldn't comprehend was the fundamental human approach to psychological challenge. Where most species saw threat, humans saw potential. Where others would collapse, humans would reconstruct. Their entire civilization seemed to be a continuous, adaptive problem-solving mechanism. The most disturbing revelation came from studying human cultural artifacts, their literature, their art, their media. Everything was essentially a continuous exploration of overcoming impossible challenges. What the Zarkay saw as potentially demoralizing scenarios, humans saw as inspirational narratives. A typical human response to an existential threat wasn't fear or submission. It was curiosity, followed by an immediate impulse to understand, adapt, and overcome. The Zarkay had approached humanity expecting to find a civilization to conquer. Instead, they had discovered a species that didn't just resist psychological warfare, they had weaponized it as a form of collective evolution. Humanity wasn't just a civilization, it was a living, breathing, continuously adapting organism, and it was learning faster than anything the Zarkay had ever encountered. The psychological revelation was complete. Humanity was not a species to be understood. It was a force of nature waiting to be comprehended. The conflict had long since ceased to be a traditional war. It was now a comprehensive systems challenge that redefined the very concept of interstellar engagement. Humanity's technological capabilities had evolved beyond anything the Zarkay Collective could have anticipated. What began as a defensive response had transformed into something far more profound, a civilization-wide adaptive mechanism that turned every technological encounter into an opportunity for fundamental transformation. The first indication of the true turning point came from an unexpected source: the International Distributed Research Network. What had started as a collaborative scientific platform had become something far more significant, a living, breathing technological organism that spanned multiple continents and transcended traditional boundaries of scientific discipline. Dr. Imani Okoro, leading a team of researchers from the African Quantum Collaborative, made the breakthrough that would fundamentally alter the nature of the conflict. Their work wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but a comprehensive reimagining of space-time manipulation that made Zarkay faster-than-light travel look like primitive chemical rocketry. The breakthrough emerged from an unlikely combination of quantum physics, biological systems analysis, and computational theory. Humans had discovered something the Zarkay considered impossible, a method of spatial navigation that didn't just move through space, but fundamentally restructured the way space and time could be perceived and manipulated. Human ships began appearing in Zarkay territory through methods that defied conventional understanding. They weren't traveling in any way the Zarkay recognized. They were essentially emerging, fully formed, at strategic points with a precision that suggested they were rewriting the fundamental laws of physics. Commander Area Santiago led the first true offensive operation. Her strike team wasn't a military unit in the traditional sense, but a mobile research platform that transformed every encounter into a comprehensive systems analysis. Where the Zarkai saw a battle, humans saw a complex problem to be solved, analyzed, and ultimately transformed. The Zarkai Collective's communication networks began to show the first signs of systemic breakdown. Their quantum communication relays, once considered the most secure in the known galaxy, started experiencing inexplicable anomalies. Information would arrive corrupted, or not at all. Strategic coordinates would shift in ways that defied computational logic. What truly terrified the Zarkai leadership was the speed of human adaptation. Each technological encounter was immediately transformed into a comprehensive learning experience. Defensive systems were being developed faster than offensive strategies could be conceived. The turning point wasn't a single battle or technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental shift in the nature of conflict itself. Admiral Catherine Rodriguez summarized it best in a classified briefing. "We're not fighting a war. We're engaged in a continuous process of collective problem-solving that happens to involve strategic confrontation." Human strike teams began conducting operations that seemed to defy the very concept of military engagement. They would infiltrate critical Zarkai infrastructure not through force, but through comprehensive systems manipulation. A single team might include a quantum physicist, a biomechanical engineer, a cultural anthropologist, and a former special operations specialist, all functioning with a level of collaborative intuition that overwhelmed traditional strategic analysis. The Zarkai had approached humanity expecting to find a civilization to conquer. Instead, they had provoked a species that sought every challenge as an opportunity for collective evolution. Diplomatic channels had long since collapsed. What remained was a continuous, adaptive engagement that was reshaping the fundamental understanding of interstellar conflict. The Zarkai were no longer dealing with a mere civilization. They were confronting a living, breathing adaptive system that turned every encounter into an opportunity for transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the primary strategic coordinator, understood the deeper implication. "This isn't about winning," she told her team. "This is about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence itself." The turning point was complete. Humanity had ceased to be a target of conquest. They had become something far more dangerous, a force of continuous, collaborative transformation that was rewriting the very rules of galactic civilization. The final stage of the conflict was not a war in any traditional sense. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of the Zarkai Collective's fundamental understanding of existence. In the quantum archives of the Zarkai Central Governance Chamber, the final report from Supreme Analyst Krivax was a document that would be studied for generations, a testament to the complete psychological and technological dismantling of a civilization that had considered itself invincible. "We sought warriors," the report began, "and found monsters wearing human skin. But these were not monsters of violence or destruction. They were monsters of adaptation, of relentless innovation, of a collective consciousness that transformed every challenge into an opportunity for growth." The Zarkai had approached humanity with the confidence of a civilization that had conquered thousands of species. They had perfected a method of galactic integration that had worked for millennia. Identify, intimidate, integrate. Humanity had rewritten every single one of those assumptions. What truly broke the Zarkai was not a military defeat, but a comprehensive revelation of their own limitations. Human civilization was not a static entity to be conquered, but a dynamic, living system that sought every encounter as a chance for collective evolution. Their approach to the conflict was so fundamentally different from any known galactic paradigm that it defied conventional understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final strategic analysis was transmitted across multiple communication spectrums, a document that would become a foundational text in understanding the conflict. "We are not a species," she explained. "We are a problem-solving mechanism. Our individual differences are our strength. Our ability to collaborate is our true weapon. The breaking point came not through a single decisive battle, but through a comprehensive systems failure that exposed the fundamental fragility of the Zarkai Collective's approach to existence. Human technological teams had done more than develop defensive capabilities. They had systematically deconstructed the Zarkai's entire technological infrastructure, revealing it to be a brittle system that relied on rigid hierarchical control. Each technological probe was not just defended against but used as an opportunity to understand and ultimately transform the attacking systems. Commander Area Santiago led the final operation, if it could be called an operation. It was more a comprehensive systems analysis that happened to dismantle the Zarkai's primary governance infrastructure. Her team didn't just attack, they revealed, they understood, they transformed. The Zarkai communication networks began to collapse from within. Not through direct attack, but through a comprehensive understanding that exposed their fundamental structural weaknesses. Human teams had essentially taught the Zarkai's own systems how to recognize their own limitations. In the final moments, the Zarkai leadership understood the true horror of their miscalculation. Humanity was not a species to be conquered or controlled. They were a living, breathing adaptive mechanism that sought every limitation as an opportunity for growth. The psychological impact was total and complete. The Zarkai Collective, a civilization that had conquered thousands of species, found itself completely dismantled not through overwhelming force, but through a comprehensive exposure of its own systemic limitations. What truly terrified the remaining Zarkai leadership was the realization that humanity had never seen them as an enemy to be destroyed. They had seen them as a complex problem to be solved, understood, and ultimately transformed. Dr. Imani Okoro, leading the final diplomatic and technological integration team, summarized it best. We don't seek to destroy. We seek to understand. And in understanding, we create the possibility of something entirely new. The monstrous revelation was complete. Humanity had not just survived. They had redefined the very concept of galactic civilization. They were not warriors. They were not conquerors. They were something far more dangerous, a continuous, collaborative force of transformation that saw every challenge as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become something entirely new. The Zarkai had sought warriors. They had found monsters wearing human skin, monsters not of destruction, but of relentless, collaborative evolution.